So if you've been tuning in to the newly expanded 48-team World Cup, you already know it's been an absolute roller coaster, right? I mean, beneath all the incredible goals, the dramatic saves, and the pure emotion we're seeing on the pitch, there's actually a fascinating and honestly kind of terrifying mathematical reality driving these outcomes. In this explainer, we're going to dive deep into how expanding the world's biggest sporting event to 48 teams has basically completely thrown off the competitive balance. But don't worry, it's not all doom and gloom, because we're also going to explore a brilliant mathematical solution proposed by researchers that could totally fix the whole shebang.
Just to put this into perspective, the group stage literally just wrapped up with a staggering 72 matches. That's across 12 groups of 4 teams. Think about that volume for a second. That is just a huge amount of football. You know, in the classic 32-team format that we've had for decades, the entire tournament, from the opening kickoff all the way to lifting the trophy, was just 64 matches in total. And now, we are blasting right past that number before the knockout rounds even begin. Obviously, it's a massive commercial and logistical undertaking, clearly designed to bring more nations to the global stage and, well, push more content to our screens.
Now, obviously, with this massive scale comes incredible talent, and seeing these superstars dominate is exactly why we tune in, right? We've got Lionel Messi out there completely defying his age, leading the pack with 6 goals and a massive 8.67 FOTMAL rating. We've got Kylian Mbappe right on his heels with 4 goals, and Vinicius Jr. just creating absolute havoc with 3.5 expected goals. But here is the catch. While the individual brilliance is definitely as thrilling as ever, squeezing 48 teams into this specific tournament structure has exposed a deeply flawed mathematical design. And this flaw actually threatens the fundamental fairness of the competition itself. So where does the math actually start to break down? Well, to populate the round of 32, FIFA has to rely on this incredibly awkward mechanism. Because if you just take the top 2 teams from 12 groups, you only get 24 teams. You can't just do that anymore. So, tournament organizers are basically forced to advance the 8 best third-place teams just to round out that bracket of 32. And finding those exact 8 teams is exactly where the entire system mathematically falls apart. It causes these massive structural distortions that just ripple throughout the rest of the event.
This whole mechanism creates a fundamentally biased dynamic that physicists and researchers call global coupling. Basically, global coupling means you're evaluating a team playing in Group A against a team playing all the way over in Group L. You are deciding who gets to advance based on their stats, despite the fact that they played in entirely different environments against totally different opponents who have totally different playstyles and difficulty levels. It's like comparing apples to, a completely different sport. It's a system that completely shatters that beautiful, balanced, structural symmetry of the classic power of 2 tournaments we've enjoyed for literally decades.
And the result of this global coupling? Pure, unadulterated chaos. As physicist Chong Chi's recent research paper points out, the classic 32-team format had exactly 1 bracket configuration. You knew exactly where you were going. But this new system requires selecting 8 out of 12 third-place teams, which explodes the possible bracket combinations to a mind-boggling 495 distinct configurations. I mean, just imagine being a fan trying to book a hotel or a flight to follow your team. Until the very last whistle of the final group stage match, absolutely nobody has any idea who is playing who or where they're even going.
Let's look at how this mathematical nightmare actually played out on the pitch. Take a look at this absolute logjam on the third-place table. Tournament survival came down to a razor-thin margin of exactly 3 points. Senegal squeaks through with a +2 goal difference. But imagine being a fan of Iran, South Korea, or Scotland right now. All of them finished with exactly 3 points as well, yet they are sent packing just because their goal difference was slightly worse. And remember that global coupling problem we just talked about? They didn't even play the same teams as Senegal. It was literally never a level playing field to begin with. Now, here's the crazy part. This wasn't just bad luck, it was entirely predictable. Researchers actually ran the math through hundreds of thousands of computer simulations and predicted this exact 3-point cutoff. But it gets worse. Those simulations exposed what they called the pot for donor effect. If you look at this, a third-place team's chance of advancing absolutely skyrockets if they simply had the sheer luck to be drawn into a group with a remarkably weak 4th-seeded team, what they call a donor team. You essentially just beat up on the weakest team in the tournament, artificially inflate your goal difference, and use those padded stats to knock out a team from a much tougher group. It entirely rewards the luck of the draw over actual competitive merit.
And this isn't just a bunch of numbers on a spreadsheet. This mathematical mess leads to a real human cost on the pitch. And frankly, it makes for a worse product for us watching at home. It totally dilutes the competitive intensity. Teams realize pretty early on that 3 points and a decent goal difference might be enough, so they start playing hyper-defensively just to preserve stats rather than actually playing to win.
Plus, it creates these massive asymmetric information advantages. Think about it. Teams playing their final matches on day 12 already know exactly the goal difference they need to hit to knock out a team that finished their group way back on day 10. It leads to pure desperation and some completely bizarre tactical decisions.
We saw this exact desperation and chaos with South Korea's agonizing elimination. I mean, they had a truly bizarre campaign. They were dealing with media boycotts and incredibly genuine fears of Mexican military drones spying on their training sessions. No, really. And then their legendary captain Son Heung-min was dropped to the bench in a critical match. They ended up losing 1-0. South Korea got stuck on those 3 points with a -1 goal difference and were promptly sent home. If you read the deep frustration in Son's quote here, it's just sad. A legend of the game, likely at his last tournament, ousted by an opaque and completely punishing mathematical system.
The format was so punishing and frustrating that Czech striker Patrik Schick actually retired from international football entirely following his team's chaotic exit. They finished with just 1 point after a brutal campaign, and his quote here is basically a clear plea for systemic changes to the sport. When the sheer architecture of a tournament leaves world-class athletes feeling so disenfranchised and helpless that they literally retire from international duty, yeah, you know the system is fundamentally broken.
Okay, thankfully, we don't just have to sit around and complain about this mess. There is an elegant, mathematically sound fix proposed by researchers, and it's called the four-section bracket, or FSB for short. If you look at the comparison here, it allows us to move away from the absolute chaos of global coupling with its 495 configurations over to a beautifully streamlined system of local decoupling with just one perfectly predictable configuration. It basically takes the messy reality of 48 teams and elegantly restores the symmetry we used to have. The mechanics of this solution are actually beautifully simple. So step 1, instead of a massive global free-for-all, you simply divide the 12 groups into 4 self-contained sections of 3 groups each. Easy enough. Step 2, within each local section, you advance the group winners, the runners-up, and just the top 2 third-place teams from that specific section, so you aren't comparing them to the rest of the world anymore. And finally, step 3, you use a fixed symmetric rule to transfer the lower-ranked teams to opposite sections for the knockouts. Boom! You completely decouple the chaos. So here is what that new, clean path actually looks like. In this blueprint, the group winners, which are labeled as X1, Y1, and Z1, they stay in their home section and act as these protected anchors. Then, the third-place teams and the runners-up are transferred in from other sections to face them. And because the third-place qualifiers are selected locally, you don't have to wait for the entire tournament to finish to know who plays who. You reduce those 495 mathematical configurations down to just one single, fixed, and completely predictable path per section.
Ultimately, this systematic transfer rule fixes almost every single flaw we've talked about today. Because you're only comparing third-place teams within a small 3-group local section, it virtually eliminates that unfair Pot 4 donor bias. It gives us a predictable schedule for fans with just one configuration. It guarantees that teams from the same group absolutely cannot meet again until the semifinals. It finally rewards the top 8 group winners with a fair and predictable path. And it completely removes the incentive for teams to strategically underperform just to get an easier draw. It goes right back to rewarding winning, which is how it should be. Look, the 4018 era is definitely here to stay, bringing incredible global representation and undeniable commercial power to the sport. But as we look ahead to 2030, a massive question remains for the organizers. Are they going to continue to embrace the unpredictable, punishing chaos of global coupling, or will they adopt this elegant mathematical solution to reclaim competitive fairness for the players and the fans? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, so let me know what you think the right move is down below. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.